More bad news for Terence Bud Crawford. Bob Arum reveals that Crawford was right. He couldn't make the fight with Errol Spence. The cat is officially out of the bag. Oh, y'all don't want to miss this. Please stay tuned to my video. We gon' cook. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. I'll try to keep my intro brief. Make sure you guys throw a like on the video. Use some of my affiliate links. Great ways to support the channel. Now, in the words of Roy Jones Jr., I didn't want to do this, but y'all made me. I told you in this boxing game, I've been doing this for a while, I love when my back is against the wall. The things that I say on my channel, I stand on them 10 toes down. I've told you my thoughts on the Terence Crawford fight. The whole conversation about Crawford, Errol Spence, what is the real dilemma? Did Spence duck and all that? And I told you, no, that is not the issue. We know what the issue is. A lot of people doubted me, but I'm going to go over some brand new information from Mr. Bob Arum, who has promoted Crawford's last 10, 20 fights or whatever the situation is up until the Porter fight. And I'm going to break it down, and you guys are going to further see that Crawford is not blame-free in this process, and you'll get to see what the real issues were with the Spence fight. Link in the description. Roll the clip.
Which is now expired, so he's a free agent like in any sport.
This is Ariel Helwani talking to Bob Arum, and Bob Arum is explaining that Terence Crawford is now a free agent. Lego.
And he will do the best for himself going forward. And if it's with us on a fight-by-fight basis or with another promoter, that's up to him.
At the post-fight press conference following his win over Sean Porter, he spoke about maybe seemingly moving on from you and saying that you couldn't get him the Errol Spence fight, and it was a bit awkward. You didn't say anything in that moment. Was it awkward for you?
No, because he's right.
Oh, whoa, yo, hold up. Ariel Helwani, shout out to him, asked a beautiful question. He says, post-fight at the Crawford-Porter post-fight press conference, you were next to Errol Spence, and he seemingly was moving on and saying he's moving on because you, Bob, couldn't get me the Errol Spence fight, right? And Ariel Helwani says, did that make you feel a type of way? And Bob Arum's first response was no, because he's right.
You didn't say anything in that moment. Was it awkward for you?
No, because he's right. If that's probably the biggest fight for Crawford is Spence.
Hold on, because a lot of people want to blame Errol Spence, but now the truth is coming out. I told you I'm about to cook. Y'all said I was wrong. I like when I'm backed against the wall. So he was asked directly about that incident that pretty much went viral after Crawford Porter, where he was like, Bob couldn't give me the fight when I was with him, so how is Bob going to give me the fight when I'm not with him? You know, but I wish everybody the best. Remember when Crawford said that? He says, no, he's right. So he's admitting that he wasn't able to get the Errol Spence fight. So why is old media saying that Errol Spence is ducking? Looking shaky, but let me take it back so y'all can hear it again. Lego.
Fight for
listen.
That's probably the biggest fight for Crawford is Spence.
That's probably the biggest fight for Crawford is Errol Spence. So once again, you want to blame Errol Spence, man down, Al Heyman, blah, blah, blah. He just told you. So this is a brand new interview. Great job, Ariel Helwani. And he says the biggest fight for Crawford is Errol Spence. Slow it down. I just dissed you. Roll the clip.
Crawford's biggest fight out there, as I see it, is Josh Taylor.
Oh, whoa, yo, hold up. So, in a more recent interview, Bob Arum is saying Crawford's biggest fight is now Errol Spence, which is what fans probably closer to what fans are saying. But previous to that, before it was a known thing that Crawford was leaving with the, hey, Bob couldn't give me the fight thing. Now he's saying Errol Spence is the best fight. Listen.
Crawford's biggest fight out there, as I see it, is Josh Taylor.
He just said it. This is the same person in the span of a month in terms of interviews.
Which is now easier for Spence, for Crawford. That's probably the biggest fight he's right. That's probably the biggest fight for Crawford is Spence.
I'm so confused. But Errol's the problem. Bob Arum just previously told you that the biggest fight for Terence Crawford is Josh Taylor. After it's pretty much known that Crawford's exploring free agency, now he switches it and he's no longer saying Josh Taylor. Look, boom. Bob Arum says Josh Taylor is the most lucrative fight for Terence Crawford. Bob Arum says Terence Crawford versus Josh Taylor does 1.5. Oh, what do you know? Made it, ma. Top of the world. I got the number 1 and 2 videos, right? 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago. Y'all said I don't know boxing? Okay. Bad news. Bud Crawford versus Josh Taylor is eyed by Bob Arum. Terence Crawford ducked by Errol Spence. Arum says Josh Taylor is the blah, blah, blah. So after Bob Arum pitched to the whole world that the biggest fight for Terence Crawford is who? Josh Taylor. That's what he said. Don't get mad at me. I'm only being real. He said the biggest, most lucrative fight because we could sell out the UK. Taylor's from the UK, and it makes all the sense in the world. Now, on a more recent interview, he's saying something completely different after telling us that.
Which is now expired. That's probably the biggest fight for Crawford is Spence. And it would be easier for, say, Al Heyman to make that fight.
It will be easier for Al Heyman to make that fight. So now the cat is out of the bag. Bob Arum is telling you now that he's a free agent, it's easy for Al Heyman to make the fight. So in Terence Crawford, I told you I'm big on accountability. In Terence Crawford re-signing to Bob Arum, who has been throwing him under the bus, saying he's losing money with Crawford. Crawford can't sell. Crawford can't make no money. And re-signing, like I said before, Terence Crawford, he made his bed. And up until recently, until his contract expired recently, he's had to lie in it. Bob Arum is telling you what you need to know. He says now that fight is easy. And then he comes up after this, because I've already heard what he said. Now he comes after this and he says, but then we got to worry about losing money on the fight. And, Al Heyman might want to do the fight with us. So it's a shared risk and responsibility, yada, 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 yada.
Or say Al Heyman to make that fight. That's probably the biggest fight for Crawford is Spence. And it would be easier for, say, Al Heyman to make that fight.
It's easier for Al Heyman to make that fight, which is exactly what I told all of you. It's easier. But Crawford wanted to do things his way, and now this is why he didn't have the jump start that, and the respect from fighting all the big names and things in his welterweight division that he could. And that's why he's just now getting to square one, just getting to a neutral space in free agency. Like I said.
The problem is,
now listen,
the fighters will want so much money for that fight, that any promoter putting it on risks a big loss. That's what fans don't realize. You see, in boxing, not in UFC or Bellator, we have to put fights on and hopefully either break even or make some money. With a Crawford Spence fight, that becomes very, very difficult because of the purse demands of both fighters.
Interesting.
So keep in mind, what Bob Arum just said has nothing to do with Errol Spence ducking, right? And keep in mind, Bob Arum in the past has basically said that Errol Spence is ducking and Al Heyman is hiding him and all this stuff like that. But what he just said about, the promoter can lose money because of the purse demands of both fighters, the fans were trying to create this narrative that Errol Spence is ducking. So losing money on the business end, fans don't care about that. We not losing money except for purchasing merchandise or maybe tickets or pay-per-view. But that's not really a loss because we're getting something out of it, right? So we don't, as fans, we don't care about this. So I'm still trying to understand this narrative that Errol Spence is the problem or PBC is the problem. It's not looking good. Looking shaky, baby.
And, Al probably, if he wanted to do that fight, would want Top Rank and ESPN to be a partner to share the risk and maybe to bring in extra revenue. You understand what's happening on the pay-per-view. The cable companies and the satellite providers are not performing very well. So that really hurts the revenue stream. ESPN Plus, which is a streaming platform, is doing quite well on the pay-per-view. You see that UFC only has ESPN Plus on its pay-per-view. Mm-hmm. We did that for Crawford and Porter, but no promoter can put a fight on ESPN Plus other than Top Rank because we have an exclusive arrangement with them. Mm-hmm. So Al may very well say to us, come in and let's do a joint promotion, which we've done a number of them with him, because we bring ESPN Plus to the table and plus our pockets, which would share in any loss.
Now, to me, that sounds a bit disillusioned. Bob Arum is saying that, okay, instead of taking the gamble and the risk, that PBC would reach out to him on the pay-per-view possibly. And even though Crawford's a free agent and they can work directly with him for the Errol Spence fight, that Al Heyman might want to bring Top Rank and ESPN in because they have their own budget and they got the ESPN Plus app. Now, I told y'all, I didn't want to have to do this, but y'all made me. Ironically enough, Crawford in the past, Terence Crawford and Bob Arum, they kept speaking of the ESPN Plus app with this level of prestige. And Bob Arum did it again. Like, hey, ESPN Plus, that's where it's at. I don't know about regular pay-per-view, but everyone wants ESPN Plus. I remember in terms of Wilder and Fury, he said something to this effect of like, yeah, it's good that ESPN Plus. And they basically made it sound like the ESPN Plus app is moving the needle and everything has to go through the ESPN Plus app. Otherwise, it's not turning profit. Ironically enough, and he's just told you, Bob Arum just told you after the Crawford-Porter fight, he says we used ESPN Plus, so Al Heyman may want to join forces. Even though Crawford's a free agent, Al Heyman may want to join forces because we are exclusive to ESPN Plus. Now, here's the irony. Shazam! Oh, my gosh. After the fight that Bob Arum just listed, Crawford versus Porter, This is what Crawford said, and I will put the link in the description. Terence Crawford says, quote, "So many people told me they don't know how to get the ESPN Plus app. Didn't buy the Sean Porter fight." And the numbers, the numbers showed that. The numbers showed that. So this is what Crawford's saying. So in the past, Terence Crawford himself has stated that he's fighting on an app.
Which is now expired.
He's fighting on an app, and he's saying, like, this is where it's at. Top Rank got the ESPN Plus app. They didn't really promote the Porter fighter good, or excuse me, they didn't promote the Sean Porter fight good in terms of a buildup, in my opinion. And Bob Arum is saying, like, oh, it's about the ESPN Plus app, and we're exclusive to them, which is true. There's no boxing. Top Rank got an exclusive deal with ESPN Plus. It's the only way to put it, right? But after the fight that Bob Arum mentioned was exclusive to ESPN Plus pay-per-view, Crawford told the whole world that, hey, people were having trouble and they didn't know how to buy my fight, so they didn't get to support. Oh my gosh, man, the walls keep closing in. I told y'all, y'all can't beat me with the facts, all facts. In addition, Bob Arum says Crawford isn't a pay-per-view draw. We lost money on every Crawford fight. So in Bud's mind, Bud truly believes that he's like the A side over Errol Spence, which is another situational thing that will create complexities at the negotiating table with Terence Crawford. His own sister said, well, should have made the big fights. This is to Bob Arum saying that he lost money on Crawford, all of Crawford's fights. Well, he should have made the big fights that Bud was asking for instead of putting Bud in with fighters that were unknown. So Terence Crawford, some of his fans seem to have this chip on their shoulder like it's everybody else's problem. And I'm giving you guys as clear as day with visible proof what the real issues are. To me, this doesn't really have anything to do with Errol Spence is petrified and afraid to lose. And Terence Crawford's business is his business, and his business is now on Front Street, and we're getting to see the real issues. Bob Arum, now that Crawford's a free agent, he didn't say anything about Errol Spence was ducking. He starts saying something else about you could lose money on the fight because of the fighter purses and all that. So how are we blaming Errol Spence when he's not even using that anymore? In addition, as I played for you, he told the whole world the biggest fight for Terence Crawford. Previously, he said it was Josh Taylor. Now he's saying something different.
Porter, he spoke about maybe seemingly moving on from you and saying that you couldn't get him the Errol Spence fight, and it was a bit awkward. You didn't say anything in that moment. Was it awkward for you?
No, because he's right. If that's probably the biggest fight for Crawford is Spence.
That's the biggest fight for Crawford, Spence. But previously he said, the same person said,
Crawford's biggest fight out there, as I see it, is Josh Taylor.
And maybe Teofimo one day moving up, or
And Teofimo moving up, yeah.
thank you, Bob.
Bob, what is next for Terence?
Thank you.
What is next for Terence, Bob?
What?
What is next for Terence?
For
Crawford.
we're discussing that, and you know, there are a lot of guys that he can fight that are interesting. There's a lot of 140 pounders.
Errol Spence is ducking, but Bob Arum just said there's a lot of 140 pounders that Crawford could fight. Oh, y'all are hilarious in the comment section. He just said, so keep in mind, this is a guy who was undisputed at 140. Bob Arum just said there's a bunch of 140 pounders he could fight. This was, of course, before Teofimo lost, and he lost at 35. So even though a reporter asked about that, now the fact that Teofimo lost and is claiming breathing issues, and this was at 35, no one's going to want to watch Crawford versus Teofimo 2 divisions higher. And Bob Arum is telling you that Crawford could fight 140 pounders.
That I want to go up to one and 104.
That's hilarious.
We're discussing that, and you know, there are a lot of guys that he can fight that are interesting. There's a lot of 140 pounders that want to go up to 147, like maybe Ramirez, maybe Prograis, maybe a number of guys that we've been talking to.
So, old media is pitching this narrative that Errol Spence is ducking, but the person that promoted Crawford's career, basically, up until the Porter fight, was telling, before his last fight expired, the Porter fight, telling the whole world multiple times, I got 140 pounders for Crawford. Again, this is the situation that Crawford has accepted. This is the situation Crawford has been. This is the business and who he got in bed with, so to speak, in terms of the proverbial business. This is why Crawford hasn't received a lot of the bigger name fights. I mean, Crawford wanted to do things his way, and it's a gamble. You try to do things your way, it's going to either sink or swim. It's going to work or it's not going to work. And as we can see, at age 34, it hasn't worked. You got a couple names, but you got those names past when they would have been more effective wins. Like if he would have fought Sean Porter in 2017, 18, 19, like Errol Spence or Ugas.
Maybe Zepeda would be a hell of a fight.
Zepeda. Maybe Zepeda would be a good fight. I mean, I rest my case. So all that noise, Errol Spence is ducking, now you get to see what the real issues are. The decisions that have been made. And that's why Errol's the big fish when it comes to the situation. Now, we'll see. We'll see if the fight plays out. But I'm not holding out too much faith. Crawford, he's doing this real passive-aggressive stuff where 1 minute he says, I'll never fight Errol. I'm never going to mention Errol again. And then the next minute he's in the ocean screaming, Errol, I'm looking for you. I'm looking for you. So I don't really know his deal as far as that's concerned. Maybe in free agency, he can bust some moves and get the fight happen. But based on what I've seen, and people can change, but what I've seen with Terence Crawford, he seems like he's such a stubborn and high-level competitor that he feels omnipotent, and that means basically almighty. And he feels omnipotent. And if you go into the negotiating room floor with Errol and his team with that type of mindset, I really have zero faith the fight's going to happen. You know, you could scream till your face turn blue, Errol's ducking, and, you know, people are going to pick who they think will happen. There's not going to be a winner and a loser if they don't fight. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, I think most things that, oh, that's a dope pick. I think most things that Crawford is currently experiencing have really been based on the decisions he's made. And this is why people question a lot of these moves at those points in Crawford's career. Now he gets it, and now he wants to break free of Bob Arum, the same guy who said weeks ago that Josh Taylor was the most lucrative, biggest fight for Spence. And then the reporter was like, what? We want to see Errol Spence. And then Bob Arum randomly brings 140-pound Josh Taylor. And to me, that's a setup. That's a setup. Crawford's now a free agency. If Crawford goes to Scotland to fight against Josh Taylor, he's a good fighter already. Don't be surprised if something like hanky with the scorecards happens. I would, if the odds are right, and Josh Taylor is enough of an underdog, I would put money on Josh Taylor winning probably a decision or a draw or something, or just something weird happening if it happens in Scotland. So to me, I think that's a setup for Bud Crawford to potentially lose, much the same as Pacquiao versus Jeff Horn. I told you I unpack all the facts. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, but this is why Errol Spence is big fish, and he's in the position that he's in because, like his pops told him, sign with Al, and I don't think he's ever looked back. Meanwhile, you got Bob Arum, who promoted Crawford's career for the most part. You know, he was the reason we know about Crawford is basically since he hooked up with Top Rank. I know he had a promoter before that. And this is what is being said about a guy as talented as Crawford. Crawford isn't a pay-per-view draw. I lose money every time he fights. And he keeps saying that, and he keeps double downing on it. And I don't even doubt that it's true or that it's false, because look at the numbers. I mean, Crawford himself said he said so many people hit me up and they said they didn't even know how to get my fight, so they didn't even buy the fight. So it's just a poor promotion. It's a poor promotion for what was a good fight on paper, Crawford versus Porter. I mean, this is Crawford out his own mouth saying it. It's not, because I know people get mad when you start cooking with the facts and putting the little salt-based seasonings on it. They say, oh, you're hating. How am I hating when Crawford himself said that he talked to people that didn't buy his fight that otherwise may have bought the fight if the fight was better promoted and or the way to unlock it or get the fight was a little bit more widely known. But Top Rank at ESPN, they haven't really put that same type of energy in their black fighter like we've seen with PBC and some of their top black fighters, Errol Spence, Deontay Wilder, Gervonta Tank Davis, Jamal Charlo, and Keith Thurman at a point, Broners. They got the red carpet star treatment and big opportunities and big fights. And nobody can change the past and what has already happened. And that's the reality of it. So Crawford, he's really just playing catch up. He's just now getting to the point where you're at the starting line and Errol Spence has already been running. Keith Thurman has already been running. Danny Garcia has already been running. These guys are already on the track running. And you just now just finished warming up. And then you're like on your marks, get set. You're the only one still at the starting point. And it's a shame because it's politics and you hate to see it. You hate to see a talented fighter waste away prime years or, I hate to see any man who can't get to realize their truest dreams. Crawford was undisputed at 140 and it's been very difficult for him to get so much as one more belt. He got his first belt in his first fight. So every single fight that he's had at welterweight outside of the Jeff Horn fight was a title defense. He's never unified because his business didn't make sense and he stayed with people for long enough and those opportunities weren't made. Bob Arum's thinking about losing money and all this stuff. Look at what I'm saying. Your Dennis Ugas, talented Cuban fighter who's obviously good enough to beat the likes of Manny Pacquiao because he just beat him. And I thought he beat Sean Porter as well, right? He's that good. Bob Arum and Top Rank had Ugas's career. They were in charge of his career before the Porter fight, before the fight with Figueroa, before the fight with Pacquiao. But the reality is a lot of people don't know Ugas from his Top Rank days because he wasn't in any high profile fights like that, right? They know him from being on PBC main events. So like I said, Crawford, he chose to bet on himself and all that. That's cool. Wilder did it too. But when you do it, you got to make sure it works in your favor. Wilder didn't take the $100 million from DAZN. He's like, I'm betting on myself. But guess what? Wilder got the looks that he wanted. 3 Tyson Fury fights, pay-per-view fights, Luis Ortiz, 2 pay-per-view, right? Andy Ruiz is probably going to be a pay-per-view fight. So he's made a lot of money with the Fury fights especially. Crawford's made some money, but hasn't really gotten the looks that he wants. And that's the reality of it. Checkmate. We unpack.